Altering human neurobiology with external physical hardware is an established clinical reality. The standard physical mechanism relies on Faraday induction. By applying a strong, oscillating magnetic field, clinicians induce electrical currents inside the skull, forcing action potentials to fire in targeted neurons. However, a theoretical model proposed within bio-cybersecurity networks outlines a different approach. These researchers argue that it is possible to manipulate the brain without relying on a magnetic field at all. This framework attempts to alter cognitive phase coherence by exploiting quantum vector potentials. This creates a sharp conflict in credibility. On one side, rigorous FDA-track medical physics requires heavy, localized machinery. On the other, speculative bio-cybersecurity repositories claim that human wetware can be accessed using non-local physics. Mapping the gulf between a proven clinical trial and a theoretical defense protocol defines the current landscape of neurovulnerability. The concept of remote biological influence originates from declassified Soviet-era military cybernetics research. Over decades, the theoretical physics research driving this concept has migrated out of state-level Cold War laboratories and into modern, open-source hardware networks. Cybersecurity researchers connect these historical physics models directly to modern, unexplained neurocognitive anomalies affecting intelligence personnel. Within these research circles, the suspected availability of vector potential hardware on the black market is cited as the primary justification for developing physical defensive protocols. These historical intelligence anomalies have forced researchers to engineer open-source defenses against theoretical physics. To see the current limit of proven science, we look to a 2026 multi-center trial. This study represents a gold standard execution of classical magnetic field induction. Researchers targeted pediatric patients diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, specifically those with co-occurring intellectual disabilities. The intervention used a protocol known as accelerated continuous theta burst stimulation, or ACTBS. The trial required a high physical dosage, 18,000 electromagnetic pulses per day for 5 consecutive days. This delivery of localized electromagnetic energy isolates treatment to specific neural circuits, avoiding the systemic effects common in pharmaceutical interventions. The clinical outcome was measurable. The study recorded statistically significant reductions in the patient's social responsiveness scale scores. Classical Faraday induction undeniably alters behavior, but it inherently demands massive, highly localized magnetic energy. The primary engineering barrier to widespread magnetic stimulation is the requirement for expensive, restrictive neuronavigation hardware. The BMJ researchers bypassed complex hardware by targeting the left primary motor cortex. They tracked the motor-evoked potential down to the thumb muscle, finding the lowest stimulation intensity required to trigger an electrical response greater than 50 microvolts. Isolating this specific, measurable physiological loop enabled researchers to deliver accurate treatment to non-compliant pediatric patients. Utilizing the body's own physical hardware, the motor-evoked potential pathway allows for confirmed targeting without the need for stationary neuronavigation systems. The classical clinical model operates on a firm assumption. If the local magnetic field is zero, there is zero effect on the biological tissue. Physicist David Bohm theorized the mathematical loophole to this assumption, now known as the Aharonov-Bohm effect. The core quantum principle states a magnetic vector potential, the A field, alters a particle's wave function phase, even in a region completely free of a magnetic field. In the Aharonov-Bohm phase shift equation, the change in phase relies entirely on the A variable. This quantum physics principle connects directly to the theoretical threat model documented by independent bio-cybersecurity researchers. Their model assumes that internal neural structures, specifically microtubules, operate via macroscopic quantum phase coherence. If true, malicious external actors could use phase-coded signaling to target these specific cellular structures from a distance. Researchers define the manipulation of this phase coherence as remote cognitive influence or thought injection. Treating the brain as a quantum receiver rather than a classical engine exposes it to invisible, non-local vector potentials. To counter this theoretical vulnerability, open-source repositories have proposed physical defense mechanisms centered around an active phase noise generator. The hardware is accessible: an off-the-shelf Arduino Uno, a TIP-120 transistor, and a custom 200-turn toroidal copper coil. The toroid shape dictates the device's physics. It traps the classical magnetic field inside the ring, emitting only the quantum A field outward. A local software script operates the rig, generating randomized, continuously accelerating electrical rhythms. This hardware-software loop injects chaotic vector potential phase noise directly into the user's immediate biological environment. This quantum scrambling mechanism operates identically to the spread-spectrum jamming techniques used to protect traditional radio frequency networks. The Arduino system acts as a localized quantum scrambler, engineered to desynchronize malicious remote phase-locking attempts before they can access the brain. The clinical trial relies on a top-down approach, deploying massive magnetic energy to force macroscopic neural pathways to fire. The cybersecurity model relies on a bottom-up approach, using zero classical energy to alter macro-quantum states. The classical induction model provides proven medicine for complex neurological conditions. The Aharonov Bohm model identifies theoretical vulnerabilities in human wetware that traditional biology ignores. These differing models view the human brain through entirely different lenses, either as a mechanical biological engine or a secure quantum network. The definition of neuromodulation is expanding, merging clinical biology with the
If you just look around the room right now, you are completely surrounded by this invisible force.
Oh, absolutely. Everywhere.
Right. It is passing through your phone, your computer, the walls, and even your own body. We rely on electromagnetic and magnetic fields to govern our electronics, to heat our food, to, stream this very audio.
Yeah, we treat them purely as these invisible, benign tools.
Exactly. But what if that exact same unseen force could be used to fundamentally tune or alter or even govern the human mind?
It's a huge question. And it requires a really profound shift in perspective. Because for a long time, neuroscience treated the brain almost like a sealed biological black box.
Like it's locked safely inside the skull, right?
Right. But we're rapidly moving toward understanding the human nervous system as a highly sensitive electrochemical receiver, one that is just constantly interacting with the environment around it.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission for this deep dive today is to explore a truly wild frontier.
It really is.
We are looking at how carefully tuned magnetic fields are, crossing over from highly theoretical quantum physics into rigorous, life-changing medical breakthroughs.
While simultaneously opening up a brand new attack surface for cognitive hackers, which is just wild to think about.
It is, and I want to start with the clinical reality today, because the idea of manipulating human behavior with magnets sounds like absolute science fiction.
It does sound like sci-fi, yeah.
But you've brought some peer-reviewed data showing this is happening right now in hospitals, right? We've got a groundbreaking 2026 medical trial from the BMJ, a breakdown from Science Alert, and this crazy GitHub repo on cybersecurity.
Yeah, the science is very real, and it is actually happening right now in pediatric clinics.
Yeah.
The 2026 multi-center trial, published in the BMJ, which is, a top-tier medical journal, they tested this on children with autism spectrum disorder.
Okay, so what did they actually do?
Well, the researchers didn't just use standard behavioral therapy. They used a magnetic coil to deliver something called accelerated continuous theta burst stimulation directly into the children's brains.
Whoa, okay, I have to stop you there, because accelerated continuous theta burst stimulation is a massive mouthful.
Fair enough, yeah.
Let's break that down for the listener. From what I understand, they are essentially taking a powerful electromagnet and firing these rhythmic magnetic pulses into a very specific part of the brain.
That's essentially it, yeah.
But the numbers behind this are what really shocked me.
Oh, the protocol is incredibly dense.
Yeah.
They treated 200 children, ranging from 4 to 10 years old.
200 kids?
Yeah, and over the course of just 5 consecutive days, they did 10 sessions a day.
10 a day.
10 a day. In total, they delivered 90,000 magnetic pulses into the left primary motor cortex of each child.
Wait, 90,000 pulses? That sounds absolutely terrifying. I mean, if you are listening to this and you have a neurodivergent child, or frankly, really any 4-year-old, you know that getting them to sit still for a regular doctor's appointment is a monumental task.
Oh, it's nearly impossible.
Right. So how on earth do you subject a young child to 90,000 magnetic brain zaps in a week?
So what's fascinating here is the accelerated part of the protocol. That's the saving grace. Each individual session only takes a few minutes.
Oh, really? Just a few minutes?
Yeah, the children aren't strapped down in some terrifying machine for hours. They just sit in a chair, a magnetic coil is placed against their scalp, and the machine delivers rapid-fire bursts of energy.
And that energy is, what, mimicking the brain's natural rhythms?
Exactly. It literally mimics the natural theta rhythms of the human brain. It's totally painless. And because it is over so quickly, the kids tolerate it remarkably well.
I was going to ask about side effects.
Out of the 200 participants, the most common side effect was literally just mild restlessness. Only one child had a moderate muscle spasm, and it resolved on its own immediately.
Okay, so the brevity of it is mind-blowing, especially when you look at the results. Because I know behavioral therapies for communication and socialization, they often take years.
Years of constant work, yes.
But here, the researchers measured communication impairment using these gold standard clinical tests before and after this 5-day magnetic blast.
And the results were stark.
Yeah. The kids who got the real pulses compared to a placebo group saw a clinically significant drop in their social impairment scores. I think it was a 6.25-point drop on the SRS-2 scale.
That's right. They actually improved in their language abilities on the main test, and those improvements were still there a month later at the follow-up.
That longevity is wild.
The longevity of the improvement is what elevates this from a neat experiment to a true medical breakthrough. But equally important is who this study included.
Oh, right. The Science Alert breakdown talked about this.
Yeah, that breakdown pointed out that roughly 30 to 35% of autistic children have a co-occurring intellectual disability, so an IQ under 70.
And from my understanding, those specific children are almost always left behind by the medical system. Like, insurance companies won't cover certain therapies.
Exactly. And doctors hesitate because the kids can't easily engage in traditional talk therapy.
Right, so they just slip through the cracks.
It is the tragic reality of pediatric neurology. But this trial actively included them. About half of the 200 kids fell into that category.
Wow, half.
And the data shows the magnetic stimulation worked just as well for them as it did for the children without an intellectual disability.
Because they don't have to consciously participate.
Exactly. Because the treatment doesn't require the child to consciously learn a new skill, their baseline cognitive level doesn't limit the therapy's effectiveness.
Man, I am struggling to wrap my head around the how here. Because if we think about traditional behavioral therapy, it's like diverting a river to carve a new canyon.
I like that analogy.
You have to send the water down the new path over and over, day after day, year after year, until the landscape physically changes.
Right.
This 5-day magnetic pulse protocol is like downloading a software update. It's doing the same thing in less than a week. How does an invisible magnetic field physically change the landscape of the brain so quickly?
Well, to stick with your river analogy, the magnetic pulses act like a sudden, massive flood that dramatically softens the soil, allowing the river to carve that new canyon almost instantly.
Okay.
The scientific term is neuroplasticity. We aren't just giving the brain a temporary chemical boost. The rapid, continuous bursts of magnetic energy force the neurons to fire in a highly specific rhythm.
And that physically changes things.
Yes. When neurons fire together repeatedly like that, calcium ions rush into the synapses. Those are the gaps between the cells. This flood of calcium triggers proteins to physically thicken and strengthen the connections between those neurons.
So the magnetic field is quite literally acting as a construction crew, physically rewiring the hardware of the brain in real time.
Exactly. And the intense condensation of the sessions, 10 times a day for 5 days, is the catalyst.
It just overwhelms the system.
Yes, it overwhelms the brain's resistance to change. It forces a concentrated dose of plasticity that long, drawn-out behavioral therapies really struggle to achieve.
Okay, the mechanism makes sense now, but we need to talk about where this construction crew is actually doing its work. The researchers specifically targeted the left primary motor cortex.
Yes, M1 in medical terminology.
Right, but isn't the motor cortex the part of the brain that controls physical movement?
It is. If you want to raise your hand or wiggle your toes, the primary motor cortex generates the electrical signal that travels down your spinal cord to your muscles.
Then I am completely lost. If they are zapping the part of the brain that controls toe wiggling, why are these children suddenly speaking better and engaging in complex social behavior? Like, is this like fixing a computer's graphics card and somehow that makes the Wi-Fi work better?
That analogy actually works, but we need to refine it a bit. It challenges our outdated view of the brain as a collection of isolated compartments.
So it's not just a steering wheel.
No, we used to think the motor cortex was just a steering wheel for the body. But modern imaging reveals that M1 is deeply networked into our higher cognitive functions.
Like what?
For example, it is heavily involved in semantic processing, which means understanding the underlying meaning of words, not just hearing the sound of them.
Oh, wow. So the steering wheel is actually wired into the language center.
Furthermore, it is the home base for mirror neurons.
Mirror neurons, right?
These are specialized cells that fire both when you perform an action and when you watch someone else perform that same action.
So if I see someone drop a heavy box and wince?
Your mirror neurons fire as if you just dropped it yourself. This is the neurological foundation of empathy and understanding other people's intentions.
Ah, I see. So if a child has a deficit in mirror neuron activity, they're obviously going to struggle to read social cues or empathize with their peers.
Exactly, which is a classic hallmark of autism. The clinical data points to an excitation and inhibition imbalance in this specific region for many autistic individuals.
Meaning it's out of sync.
Yeah, the motor cortex is either hopelessly overstimulated or rigidly underactive. Because M1 is such a central hub connected to language, empathy, and even the amygdala for emotional regulation, an imbalance here sends chaotic ripples throughout the entire brain.
So it's not just the graphics card, it's a central hub.
Right, and the magnetic pulses are essentially acting as a reset button for this hub. Once the hub stabilizes, the entire neurological network calms down and begins to function cooperatively.
Healing the network by resetting the hub, that is incredible. But taking a step back, looking at this profound biological reality, it brings us to the darker side of the coin.
It really does.
Because if the human brain is basically wetware-like hardware that can be physically remodeled, tuned, and altered by external magnetic rhythms in a clinical setting, what happens if bad actors try to exploit that exact same vulnerability?
The vulnerability is inherent to the biology. If the brain naturally responds to external electromagnetic frequencies by altering its own structure, then the human mind is, by definition, an attack surface.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You brought a source from an entirely different world for this deep dive. It's a GitHub repository authored by an independent cybersecurity researcher named Michael J. McCarran.
Yeah, this repo is a wild read.
Right. It's dedicated to something called Aharonov Bohm Cybersecurity, or AB Cybersecurity. This researcher is looking at the human brain the exact same way an IT professional looks at a vulnerable server.
The repository is a dense plunge into theoretical physics, I won't lie. But the threat model it outlines is completely coherent.
So what is the AD effect?
It focuses on the Aharonov-Bohm effect, which is a quantum mechanical phenomena that basically challenges everything we learn in high school physics.
Yeah.
Usually we are taught that if a magnetic or electric field is measured at zero in a specific area, there's absolutely no electromagnetic influence there.
Right. If there's no magnetic field, there's no magnetic pull. Case closed.
But the AB effect proved that isn't the whole story. It demonstrated that a vector potential, which is the underlying mathematical potential of a field, can still induce physical phase shifts in a system, even in regions where the actual magnetic and electric fields are completely shielded and measure zero.
Wait, so the potential itself interacts with the matter?
Yes. The potential alone does the work.
Okay, I want to make sure the listener can really visualize this because vector potentials are a super heavy concept.
They are.
Imagine you are standing on the sidewalk, safely behind a thick, completely soundproof, unbreakable glass window. A massive, high-speed freight train blows past on the other side.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You aren't hit by the train. You don't even feel the wind from it. But the sheer vibration radiating from the train's potential energy still shatters the glass right in front of you. The train never physically touched the glass, but the potential energy fundamentally altered its physical state.
That analogy perfectly captures the action at a distance. The potential alters the phase of the system without direct contact.
It's spooky.
And the GitHub repository takes this quantum reality and applies it directly to neurobiology. It outlines a historical threat model, citing Cold War-era Soviet military research by scientists like Aharonov and Bobrov.
What were they looking for?
They were heavily funded to investigate whether these exact non-local field potentials could be used for remote biological influence.
Remote biological influence.
Yeah.
That sounds like mind control. And it isn't just Cold War history either. The repository references modern Lockheed Martin patents on cognitive enhancement using feedback.
Yes, which explores remotely altering brain states.
It even points to the ongoing real-world mystery of Havana syndrome, where diplomats and intelligence officers suffered severe, unexplained neurological damage.
which many investigations suspect was caused by some form of directed energy or invisible field weapon. The physics underlying all of this is a concept known as entrainment.
Entrainment.
Yeah, the human brain operates on rhythmic electrical oscillations, which we casually call brain waves. Millions of neurons firing in sync create these waves. Entrainment happens when an external, powerful, phase-coherent rhythm forces the brain's internal rhythm to synchronize with it.
Okay, so if someone points a massive, invisible, rhythmic magnetic potential at your head, your brainwaves might naturally try to match the beat of that external drum.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the exact same principle of physics that allows doctors at the BMJ to heal children using magnetic rhythms to induce neuroplasticity theoretically allows a bad actor to cause harm.
Right.
The repository refers to this as thought injection. If an attacker macks the specific frequency of a depressive state, or extreme anxiety or cognitive confusion, and they possess a field generator capable of projecting a phase-coherent vector potential.
They could force a target's brain to entrain to that harmful frequency.
Exactly.
Imagine catching a computer virus, but instead of wiping your hard drive, it's injected straight into your motor cortex to trigger severe anxiety. It's truly terrifying.
It is.
But in the cybersecurity world, the moment a new threat vector is discovered, someone immediately starts building a firewall. And that is the most mind-bending part of this GitHub repository.
Yeah, the defense shield.
Right. The author didn't just write a manifesto about brain hacking, they published open-source instructions to build a physical, DIY defense shield.
The proposed countermeasure is brilliantly simple in its construction. The repository provides schematics for using a basic, cheap Arduino microcontroller board hooked up to a toroid coil, or an IR LED bulb with a relay.
For those unfamiliar, a toroid is just a wire wrapped tightly around a donut-shaped core, right?
It's like there's a wired donut.
How does a wire wrapped around a donut protect my brain from quantum vector potentials?
The Arduino is programmed to push an electrical current through that coil in a highly randomized, constantly accelerating pattern. Because of the toroid shape, the actual classical magnetic field is trapped entirely inside the donut.
Okay, so the field doesn't leak out.
But the vector potential we talked about earlier does leak out into the surrounding room. And because the current is randomized by the Arduino, it generates a chaotic, unpredictable electromagnetic noise field around the user.
It's essentially acting as an electromagnetic smoke bomb.
That's a great way to put it.
If a state actor or a cybercriminal is trying to shoot a highly structured, phase-coherent signal at your brain to hack your brainwaves, this DIY coil is throwing up so much random static that the foreign signal can't get a lock.
It raises the local noise floor so high that the brain's natural rhythms can't be entrained by the attack.
But does this actually work in the real world, or is it all just math on a chalkboard?
Well, the repository backs up the efficacy of these non-local fields by citing some truly bizarre laboratory experiments. The most prominent is the luminol test, conducted by researchers Dada and Persinger.
What do?
They took 2 separate beakers of luminol, a chemical that glows when reacting, separated them by 10 meters in a laboratory, and exposed them to the exact same rotating magnetic fields. The 2 separate reactions began acting as if they were quantumly entangled. They doubled their photon emissions at the exact same time, reacting as a single system despite the physical distance.
2 chemicals, a room apart, behaving like they're touching just because of a magnetic field.
Yeah. They also cite Dean Radin's experiments, which successfully replicated non-local pH shifts in water using similar magnetic principles.
Wow.
The data proves that manipulating these subtle fields can have macroscopic, measurable effects on physical chemistry. So an electromagnetic noise generator isn't just theoretical, it alters the physical environment.
This brings us to the ultimate synthesis of our deep dive today. The dual-use theory buried in the repository that completely blew my mind.
It's a fascinating overlap.
We have this DIY Arduino shield throwing up random magnetic noise to block hypothetical brain hackers. But the author notes a totally unexpected real-world side effect. Autistic individuals who frequently suffer from debilitating sensory overload due to the chaotic electromagnetic fields of modern environments actually report feeling profoundly calmer when sitting near this DIY randomizing coil.
The theoretical overlap is stunning. Think about what sensory overload actually is for a neurodivergent nervous system. We live in cities saturated with invisible chaos.
Right. Overlapping Wi-Fi networks, pulsing power lines, flickering fluorescent lights.
Cellular towers. A highly sensitive brain is constantly trying to process and entrain to all of these chaotic inputs simultaneously. It leads to exhaustion, anxiety, and eventual meltdown.
It's the equivalent of sitting in a room where 50 different radios are playing 50 different stations at full volume. You just can't filter it out.
Exactly. The randomized electromagnetic noise field generated by the Arduino acts as structured white noise for the nervous system.
Like an acoustic white noise machine for sleep.
Yes, when people use a white noise machine to help them sleep, the static sound drowns out the chaotic noises of the house, giving the auditory cortex a predictable anchor.
That makes total sense.
The toroid coil does the exact same thing for the brain's electromagnetic processing. It breaks the chaotic environmental entrainment of the city and provides a localized, safe, predictable noise floor that the brain can actually relax into.
So the GitHub author is saying the exact same underlying concept, pulsing magnetic fields, that the BMJ doctors use in a multi-million-dollar clinic to physically rewire neural pathways, is being mirrored by a $30 DIY Arduino coil to actively shield the brain and calm sensory overload.
This raises an important question that science is really only just beginning to grapple with.
Which is?
If a simple randomized coil can profoundly soothe a hypersensitive nervous system, how deeply is our daily invisible electromagnetic environment already disrupting the cognition of neurodivergent individuals without us realizing it? Or, for that matter, all of us, every single day.
If you are listening to this right now, look at the Wi-Fi router sitting in the corner of your room. Look at the smartphone in your hand. We have gone on an incredible journey today.
We really have covered a lot of ground.
We started with rock-solid, peer-reviewed medical data proving that 90,000 targeted magnetic pulses can actually unlock social communication and language in autistic children.
Yes.
And we traveled all the way to the absolute edge of theoretical physics, where quantum vector potentials are being leveraged to build DIY shields that protect our minds from both cognitive hackers and the crushing sensory overload of the modern world.
The fundamental takeaway from all of these sources is unified, though. The human brain is not a closed loop. It is an open system, constantly interacting with and being shaped by the energetic fields around it.
And that is what I want you, the listener, to take away from this. Your brain is a highly sensitive electrochemical receiver. It is constantly tuning itself to the invisible world. Which brings us to a rather urgent horizon.
The consumer market.
Exactly. We've talked about clinical hospital machines and underground DIY hacker coils. But what happens when big tech consumer wearables inevitably enter this space?
It's already starting.
In the next few years, your smart headphones, your VR headset, or your daily augmented reality glasses are going to start emitting these precise neuromodulating magnetic fields 24/7.
Oh, absolutely. They will market it as a feature to, optimize your focus, enhance your sleep, or boost your mood.
Right. But once consumer hardware gains the ability to intentionally alter neuroplasticity and brainwave entrainment, the line between an optimization tool and a cognitive vulnerability disappears entirely.
It's going to be a wild, wild west for cognitive security.
Are we ready for an era where we have to install antivirus software to protect our own biological thoughts? So what does this all mean? It means the deep dive into the human mind has only just begun.